The night the words were spoken, the rain had just stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining like a mirror held up to a restless world. Inside a modest studio washed in warm light, two men sat across from each other, one with a southern drawl sharpened by courtroom years, the other with a British edge honed by battles in Parliament. No one watching could have known that a single sentence would ripple far beyond the walls of that room, stirring old wounds, awakening quiet doubts, and forcing uncomfortable questions into the open. When Kennedy leaned forward, eyes steady, and said there were rocks in his driveway smarter than the UK's Chagos Islands giveaway, the room went silent, not because it was funny, but because it was painfully direct. Nigel Farage didn't laugh right away. He nodded slowly, like a man who had been carrying the same weight for years and had finally heard it named out loud. He had grown up believing that governments, for all their flaws, were meant to protect the long-term interests of their people. But here they were, talking about an island chain most citizens had never seen, a decision made in conference rooms far from the surf and sand, and consequences that would echo for generations. For Nigel, this wasn't just geopolitics. It was a reminder of how easily leaders could trade away responsibility and call it progress. Kennedy, meanwhile, spoke with the plain-spoken rhythm that made people listen whether they agreed or not. He told stories of his father's driveway back in Louisiana, how storms would scatter stones everywhere, and how even those rocks, unmoving and silent, understood one thing politicians often forgot: once you give something away, you don't get to pretend it never mattered. His words weren't just aimed at the UK or the Chagos Islands. They were aimed at every leader who mistook speed for wisdom and applause for legacy. As the conversation deepened, the emotional core of the issue emerged. The Chagos Islands weren't just dots. The challenge before them was larger than blame. How do democracies admit mistakes without tearing themselves apart? How do leaders slow down in a world that rewards the loudest voice and the quickest deal? Kennedy argued that humility was the missing ingredient, that a nation strong enough to admit error was stronger than one that doubled down out of pride. Nigel countered that accountability had to follow words, or else apologies became just another performance. Viewers at home felt it too. Some bristled at the bluntness. Others felt a strange relief. It was rare, after all, to hear powerful men talk less about winning and more about responsibility. The pace of the conversation never rushed, never lingered too long. It moved like a tide, pulling back to reflect, surging forward to challenge, keeping the listener engaged, invested, uneasy in the best possible way. By the end, the rain outside had started again, tapping softly against the windows. Kennedy leaned back, his voice calmer now, and said that history had a long memory, even when politicians tried to forget. Nigel added that the real test of leadership wasn't how cleverly you could explain a decision, but how bravely you could face its consequences. When the cameras finally cut, the message lingered. Decisions made far away still land close to home. Words spoken plainly can cut through layers of denial. And sometimes, the simplest wisdom, like knowing the value of what's right in front of you, can be the hardest to hold on to. The story didn't end with laughter or outrage, but with a quiet challenge to everyone watching: slow down, think deeper, and remember that intelligence and leadership isn't measured by how much you give away, but by how carefully you choose what to protect.